Welcome, soul driven writers, to the Soul Writer Podcast. This podcast is designed for writers like you who have a burning desire to share their story and message with the world and make the biggest impact possible. I'm your host, Lauren Eckhardt, bestselling author, ghostwriter, book coach, and the CEO of Burning Soul Collective. Here at the Soul Writer Podcast, we believe in the power of vulnerability and authenticity. Our mission is to inspire and empower you to write from the depths of your soul by showcasing other authors who have done exactly that. Through their journeys, you'll discover what it takes to write a book that truly resonates with readers and learn how you can embrace your own unique voice to live the writer's life that you've always imagined. So, gather your favorite writing tools, cozy up in your favorite spot, and let's explore the world of soul-driven writing together. This is the Soul Writer Podcast, where your passion meets purpose and the world awaits the magic that only you can create. Welcome to the journey. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Soul Writer Podcast. In today's episode, we are going to evaluate a little bit of what Kenneth Nixon and I talked about in the last episode in regard to writing a book that generates a movement or is part of a movement, and how do you weave your personal story into that movement. So we're going to dive into a couple of things, such as how do you, first of all, identify a movement and write about it for your book? And then secondly, when it comes to having a framework for your book, how do you develop one? And what does the structure for that book look like? So we've got a lot of information to cover, but this is really good for those of you who know that you want to write a book that truly creates that generational change that makes a bigger impact. So first of all, I need to say this, and it's one of the hardest things to admit because y'all, I love memoirs. I love people's stories. That is so much about what we do at Burning Soul Press and Burning Soul Collective. It's all about people's stories and the importance of sharing them so we can help each other and really just create those deeper connections, those meaningful connections. Um, the bottom line is, though, memoirs, people aren't really seeking out memoirs unless they know the person that the book is about, or unless, of course, they've heard how good it is or how much, someone else might like it. What makes a memoir or a person's story effective is when you are able to weave in why someone should read that book. Like, how is it specifically going to help them? Right. And this is why self help books are so important. And self help books aren't just helping someone with, what they need to do to get from island A to get and arrive at island B, but it's also about that author's personal story that they're able to weave in to, say, a framework to help someone achieve exactly that. So, first of all, before we go into how do we do all of this, the one thing that I really want to point out is that when Kenneth and I were talking about his book, Born into Crisis, he said that, in the very beginning, he had it as like a part A and or not even a part A and a part B. Originally it was that he was sharing his story, and each story then was him talking about what was wrong with like the mental health system creating this. So what would happen is that he was going into the past and then going into the present. And he was doing that for every chapter as he wrote his book. And the reason why is, of course, he was going off of almost theme for each chapter, like, okay, this is the story that happened. This is something that I can tie into what's happening today. And, that's the theme for this chapter before moving on to the next one. However, in the end, what he ended up doing is separating it into part A and part B. And what this did was allow him to be in the past, telling his full journey, how all of this made him as passionate as he is about reform in that area. And so you're able to, as a reader, stay in that past and really soak in his story because it's so emotional throughout so much of it, versus being in the story and then being taken out, being in the story and then being taken out. So that's what he did in the end. So really be able to create that full emotional um, persuasion at the same time for why people need to realize the impact of mental health. Um, and then, the second part being how do we change this? And what he's doing in his life, and then of course the call to reform from other people as well. So when it comes to that structure, there are multiple different structures you can choose for your book. I mean, number one is chronological structure. It's one of the most straightforward ways to organize a nonfiction book. So typically, events are presented then in the order that they happened. And this is really used in like historical narratives, definitely in autobiographies, and sometimes in memoirs as well. Another way to structure books is by thematic structure. And that's when, like I mentioned before, the book is divided into sections based on themes or topics rather than a specific sequence of events. So this is often used in essay collections or in books that, explore a single topic, maybe from multiple angles. Another structure is the problem solution structure. So just like it sounds, with this type of structure, you present the problem first, and then you spend the rest of the book exploring potential solutions. So, of course, this is commonly used in self help books, business books, and really any type of book that's persuasive or it has that advice oriented writing. A fourth type is the cause and effect structure. So, usually with this, the book is first presenting an event and then it's exploring the causes and the effects around that. So, typically, this is a common structure with books about social issues, history, scientific related things. Another structure is the compare and contrast structure, which is always very interesting because what it does is present different viewpoints, arguments, or presents a set of facts, and then it compares and contrasts them. So, of course, you're going to see this a little bit more in academic writing or in books that explore a more controversial issue. You're also going to have your question and answer structure. So this is, of course, usually structured around a series of questions, and then each or section is dedicated to answering them. This is a common structure for educational books or books that aim to really demystify a complex topic. Another structure is the narrative structure. So this is really most common in fiction, but some nonfiction books also follow a narrative structure. So particularly narrative nonfiction, biographies, memoirs, and historical accounts. So what it means is that they feature elements like characters and conflict and resolution. So then you're looking at things like even, character development, which is something we teach people on with memoir building. Having that conflict or resolution. We still use the three act structure in memoir writing because it is so effective. We use the three act structure and the hero's journey the most when we are coaching our memoir writers. So even though it's a narrative structure, it applies and it's very effective for memoir writing. You also have your how to or list structure, and this is more of your like step by step guide on how to do something or a list of items, tips, or ideas. You'll see a lot of shorter books related to this as well, self help books, cookbooks, instructional text as a whole. And then you also have the more complex one, which is called the matrix structure. And this is a structure that uses various elements from other structures. And what happens is that they get woven into a more complex, interconnected whole. So a book might, for example, with this, follow a chronological structure, but then have chapters devoted to thematic elements or problem solution explorations. So one thing that's really, really important to remember is that these structures are not mutually exclusive. And many books will combine different elements from several different structures to best serve their content and their audience. But if you are starting out writing a book and you're trying to figure out how to structure your book, it's always helpful to look at one and start there. And then you might just see as you continue to write, you weave in some of the other elements. Um, so when you go to write a book that has this like mission, this message that you want to get out into the world, there's change that you want to see happen for something near and dear to your heart. And many, many times we connect with these things. We find our passion for these things because of our life journey, the good and the bad. And a lot of times it seems that our bad situations are what leads us to discovering that we have a passion for a very specific topic or area and we want to be able to or issue and we want to be able to help people as much as possible related to that. I mean, it's kind of to me the interesting part about life. And when I hear people's life journeys and I find out about their life and why they are doing the things that they do, of course, it's all connected. It's really how we start to discover that and discover our passions, and many times discover part of our purpose here in this world. To really navigate how to write a book that is effective in creating change, the first thing that you want to do is you have to take a step back and, of course, choose that social issue that's close to your heart. And a lot of times, even though we know what we're passionate about, we're not very specific in stating that. So it's about getting as specific as possible as well. And, really choosing that to be what you want to write about and thinking about how, you can write it in a way where it's addressed more effectively. So, whether that's climate change, income inequality, education reform, I mean, there's so many different issues out there. Number two, you always, always, always want to make sure that you spend time researching because to write nonfiction effectively, you need to have a deep understanding of your chosen topic. So conduct extensive research. Use credible sources. Always double, triple check your sources. Don't just go with the first thing you find off the internet. Reach out to experts if possible. Interviews are powerful, and then you can bring in quotes from these experts. Your credibility and the impact of the book you write will depend on the accuracy and the depth of your knowledge. Next, you want to find personal stories. Real stories have a powerful emotional impact, right? That's how people can connect or see themselves within these stories and then find that connection to the greater cause, the greater issue. So, whether it's yours only throughout the book, like what Kenneth did with his memoir, or whether it's bringing in not just your story, but other people's stories, that's totally up to you. No matter what, think about as a reader, what might help them suddenly connect with this and then want to take action on this like you're hoping that they do. You also want to always provide context. So always help your readers to understand the broader picture. How did this issue come about? Who's responsible? What societal factors have contributed to it? When you have this sort of historical and contextual understanding, it can really help the readers understand the scale of the problem and why it needs addressing. You also always want to provide a call to action because if you want to inspire change, it's not just enough to inform people about an issue. You need to be able to tell them how they can help in multiple ways that they can help at multiple levels that they can help. That was one thing I just loved about Kenneth's book when we were talking about it is that he had all of these various levels, whether you're just writing a letter or you're actually participating and more in your community to make this change. Like, sometimes people need to start small. They need to kind of dip their toe in the water, and then they're just lit up even more with each step that they take, and then they can make more and more change. But a lot of times it's easy to get fired up and be like, yes, yes, this is definitely something I want to change, but they don't know how to do it, or they don't know the resources in their local community to get involved. So the more that you can guide them to that, the more likely you will have readers who not only become then charged about your own personal mission, but they're actually out there then making a difference. So, I mean, it could be anything from providing resources for further learning, highlighting those organizations that they can support, and providing those suggestions for actions that they can take in their daily life. So always provide that call to action. You also want to make sure that there is a clear narrative. So, of course, this includes that introduction, why this issue is important, a body of it, exploring the issue in depth through research and those personal stories, and then, of course, a conclusion, which is usually when you summarize the issue, and then you have that call to action or multiple calls to action. You also want to make sure that you're implementing persuasive writing techniques. So, like emotional appeals, repetition, directly addressing the reader, rhetorical questions to encourage readers to change their minds or take action. And then always, of course, you want to make sure that it's edited, it's refined to make sure it's top notch. And then you want to promote it like crazy, right? Because you want this to spread like wildfire. And that is always, always key of any book, let alone one that you hope to will create that change. You have to be so fired up about the same issue that you are talking about it nonstop. You can't just rely on your book to do all of the work. The book is just another helper in this, right? But the more you talk about it, the more you talk about your book, the more of a chance you have to change lives, to change the world, to help your mission. So it's so important to do that. Now, another important part is, a lot of times when we're creating a book, we're weaving in our story and we're really wanting people to feel inspired, to feel empowered to make a change in their life. Like I said, unfortunately, having it just be memoir specific is not always going to be effective enough. So what I always challenge people to is number one, I mean, you have to know your vision for your book. You have to know what you want to achieve with this book. So if all you're looking to achieve is to share your story, then that is perfectly fine. But if you are wanting to help other people, inspire them, empower them, to create some sort of change in their life or a change in the world around them, then the best thing that you can do with that is also have a framework that can guide them on how to do that. So, how do you create a framework for your nonfiction book? I get this question a lot when I'm talking with my clients about this. So, number one, like I said, you have to define your purpose, but then you also have to define your audience. So, be clear on why you're writing this book and who you're writing it for. What do you want your readers to learn or do after reading your book? How will it benefit them? Understanding your purpose and audience can help you make decisions then about what to include in your book and how to structure it. And then number two, always write down everything you can think of that relates to your book's topic. So don't worry about organizing it yet, but just focus on getting them down on paper. Okay. And now your next thing that you want to look at is all of your ideas. Then you want to think about the steps. How do I get people from where they are today to where I want them to be? What are the steps that I've implemented in my own life to make these changes? And then you take a look at those steps and you organize them. And these steps are going to come off from all of those ideas that you just spent time brainstorming. And then you organize those steps. And then you look at, can I group these steps into, sections of sorts, or do they all need to be their individual steps? And whether they're individual steps or whether you end up grouping them into sections, then you look at, can I get a little creative with this? Can I come up with a little phrase that represents this? And not all of the time it's possible, but it makes it a lot easier to also talk about using this framework. This is what we do. So, for example, with how we help our authors write books that create generational change that makes a difference, it's using our soul writer framework. And what that is the SOUL. So we have the share, the offer, the uplift, and the lead. That is how we've broken down all of our steps. Now, there's a lot of steps in between each one of those, but we ended up grouping them together in order to create the SOUL. And we know specifically what we're doing in each one of those, and each one builds on the other to lead to the overall impact and success. So that's how you create your own framework. And it's up to you, like I said, if you want to get creative with it or not. But then that is how you're looking at your book too, is you're walking people through that framework. And maybe it's like Kenneth's book where it's, part two or part B, however you want to label it in your book. Or maybe it's how you're presenting it where it's focused on the framework and then your personal stories are supporting it. Again, that's all up to you. And it really takes knowing your target audience. It takes knowing your market to know how the most successful books within those markets are also structured. And, sometimes that even takes just looking at reviews of similar books or books you've seen similar structures in. So research is always helpful in that to figure out which framework could be the most effective. You can also talk to your target audience who might be struggling with the issue that you want to address and just present your ideas to them and be like, which one do you feel like would connect with you the most and truly help you? All right. So I know we covered a lot in that, but it is really, truly just about all the different ways to write and structure your book to create the biggest impact that you want, especially with those missions that are important to you. Thank you so much for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Soul Writer Podcast. I hope today's conversation has ignited a newfound passion and determination in you to write from a place of vulnerability, authenticity, and soul. Remember, your story has the power to make a significant impact in the world. And by sharing your unique voice, you're contributing to the tapestry of human experience. So go forth, embrace your soul-driven purpose, and let your words transform the lives of your readers. Be sure to subscribe to the Soul Writer Podcast so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we'll continue to share valuable insights and inspiring stories from fellow authors. You can also join our community on social media to connect with like-minded writers and share your own journey by looking at Burning Soul Collective. Until next time, keep shining your light, and remember, your story matters. Your words have power, and the world needs the magic that only you can create. This is the Soul Writer Podcast, signing off for now. Right on, my friends.